like people feeling a little warm after that? I'm very grateful for Milwaukee Evaluation and Nicole's work. She has kept me honest over the years and challenged me to when I've been inadvertently perpetuating exclusion of people of color in my practice. And so Milwaukee Evaluation has been a great support system for me and something that's really helped me grow in my approach. So, my name is Kate Westaby and I currently work at the Wisconsin Partnership Program. So the Wisconsin Partnership Program was established in 2004 through an endowment from Blue Cross and Blue Shield United of Wisconsin. So we're a conversion fund and we're situated in the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. So we've been awarding funding since 2004, but our grant making has shifted in more recent years. And we operate under 5-year plans, and we recently began our new 5-year plan last month with this new mission statement. So we aim to bring about lasting improvement in health and well-being and advance health equity in Wisconsin through investments in community partnerships, education, and research. So those are kind of the 3 buckets of our funding. And as you'll notice that one of our goals is to advance health equity. And this has mainly been brought about because of the huge disparities in outcomes in Wisconsin. And for us, we define health equity as meaning that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be as healthy as possible. And this requires removing obstacles to health such as poverty, discrimination, and their consequences, including powerlessness and lack of access to good jobs with fair pay, quality education and housing, safe environments, and healthcare. So this is, much more focusing on the upstream determinants of health and what we know impacts health farther downstream. And we, came to this because we know that we're the worst state in the nation for African American incarceration. We're the worst state in the nation in a lot of different things. In a recent governing committee meeting for our boards, Guy Ryder, who is a member of the Menominee tribe, was presenting on progress of one of their grants. And what he said in this meeting really, I think, summarizes why funders need to make changes to the way we're funding. He commented on their county's position in the county health rankings. Does anybody know what Menominee County is ranked? Last. Yep, last, 72 out of 72. And the county is primarily made up of Native American individuals. And he said, this isn't for lack of trying. We've had a ton of research, a ton of support from funders, and nothing has changed. They're still number 72. And I can attest to this because the partnership program has provided funding to them as well. And he had said, something needs to change because a lot of times researchers will come in and they'll work with the group and then they'll move on, maybe look at publications or things like that. But they've been really trying to focus on harnessing the community's strength and to make their own change and really building capacity internally. So you might ask what this has to do with culturally responsive practice and why funders may care about CRE. For WPP, every one of WPP's goals aligns with culturally responsive evaluation. In particular, the goal to advance health equity requires attention be paid to power dynamics in grant making. So in order to advance health equity, we really need to think about power. And the practices in CRE focus on culture and how power operates and how decisions are made and who benefits from them. So essentially, CRE is a practice that can help funders achieve goals of equity and social justice, diversity, inclusion, all those things that we usually care about will change if we change the way that we do things. So I want to talk about a few of the changes that the Wisconsin Partnership Program has made using a culturally responsive evaluation lens. And I'll talk about each of these separately, but it's things like changing our RFPs, publicizing evaluation principles and resources, providing assistance and technical assistance in conducting culturally responsive evaluations, and more. So I started at the Wisconsin Partnership Program 3.5 years ago, and prior to my start, there was no evaluator there. And so most of these changes have happened in the last couple of years and are still continuing today. And it's also important for me to point out that this is not an organization-wide change. It primarily applies to the community side of our grant making and really could be expanded. So we've integrated CRV into our impact grant proposal. So the community impact grant is a $1 million grant over 5 years given to community-based organizations. The grant program began in 2015, and prior to my start at WPP, evaluation was not a significant part of any RFPs. You can see in this, it's kind of some basic traditional language. You know, how will you define impact? Will you directly measure health and well-being improvement? What resources will you deploy? And there was no criteria for evaluation in the scoring. So it wasn't a part of the scoring of the application. So in 2016, we started to get a little bit better, and I should also point out, I started on the Milwaukee Evaluation Board in 2015 as well, so you can kind of see this as also a reflection of my growth and the change in my evaluation practice after more exposure to Milwaukee evaluation. So we asked more so, what percentage of your budget will you allocate to evaluation? And a lot of people asked, what's a good percentage? And we were saying about 10% is like the normal amount. But you can also still see a very traditional evaluation approach, talking about short and medium term outcomes, rapid feedback and learning, rigorous approaches. And then we did actually start to add evidence of evaluation in the scoring of the applications. In 2017, we're starting to get a little bit warmer, and we started to say, right, we know that complex efforts do not lend themselves to traditional evaluation models. We talked about how the data will be used for rapid feedback and learning for diverse constituencies. So getting a little closer. And then in 2018, I had the chance to really rewrite the evaluation section of this RFP, and we really ramped up culturally responsive evaluation. This is a lot of text, but I'll kind of take you through how we operationalized culturally responsive evaluation in this RFP. So we talked about engaging community and individuals with lived experience in the evaluation process as key to effective community initiatives. We actually asked, who is on your evaluation team? How and what parts of the evaluation process, so planning, data collection, data interpretation, analysis, will you engage those directly impacted by the focus of the project? What experience does your evaluation team have with engaging impacted individuals? And we asked, will they build evaluation capacity of stakeholders and community members? And then we actually had, in the scoring, 25% of their score was if they had a clear description of how the evaluation engages those most impacted in processes and decision-making. So thinking about power, that's why the decision-making piece is in there. And a clear description of evaluation approaches, application, and how success is defined. So this resulted in not every application being culturally responsive, but we did have some really exciting evaluation proposals because we asked for this. So this person, this applicant said, in our evaluation, we plan to engage those directly impacted by the focus of the project in all phases of the evaluation. They plan to pay 2 neighbors as core members of the evaluation team. And so think about the power dynamic of this. You are sharing power with the community in the creation of this evaluation. So they talked about neighbor representation on the evaluation team, and that it should equate to representation of those directly impacted by the project. So I thought this was a really exciting application, and one thing for funders to note then is that this may mean spending more time training community members in evaluation. This may mean evaluation timelines are likely to be longer and budgets are greater, but the result is long-term change and that communities are making their own change, so sustainability. The other thing we've been doing, one of the next things is publicizing evaluation principles and resources on our website, and so we talk about validity demands cultural competence. So as Nicole mentioned, the American Evaluation Association is the guiding organization for evaluators in the US. And one of the first link on our webpage is to view their statement on cultural competence and evaluation. And they say validity demands cultural competence. So an evaluation is not valid unless it is culturally competent. So even thinking about our guiding organization and talking about cultural competence is necessary, is important. And then there are a couple of other links too that have been really exciting and integral in even my evaluation approach. So next, I had this very interesting talk with some evaluation team members. So in one specific instance, we were meeting with members of the evaluation team who were white and from the academic sector. That's pretty typical. And they were evaluating a grant aiming to reduce a disparity experienced by African American women. And we asked them to conduct a culturally responsive evaluation, and they assured us they were. And going back to that lip service that Nicole was talking about, we noticed the composition of the evaluation team didn't change. It remained the same, and the community was still not engaged in the decision-making process. I heard one of the evaluators say, "I don't understand why community needs to be involved in decision-making. Researchers have been studying these issues for years, and they know how to make the change." So I wasn't able to address this at the time, right? You always think about, dang, I should have said something at the time, but to me, this really shows a lack of respect for the community and importance of their experiences. It, to me, demonstrates demeaning their ability, their value, and their voice when we exclude them. And when we're thinking about how systems and policies and institutional racism was created, this is really excluding them from the process is how a lot of these things have happened, right? Building of highways that has destroyed communities, housing discrimination, and all these things have happened as a result of really not including individuals most impacted. So with this grantee, then we pushed a little bit harder and heard, well, I don't know any Black evaluators. And this evaluator was part of a large evaluation organization where they had over 40 staff. And that was pretty eye-opening for us. And we know that this isn't true, right? With the Social Justice and Evaluation Conference is a celebration, I think, of the diversity within evaluation. And so we pushed again, and we were able to make some progress. And they, wasn't ideal, but they added a Black man to the evaluation team, which resulted in him being able to push for centering the Black experience in the language used by the evaluation team. So he pointed out that the use in their data and reporting of results was white versus non-white, which centered whiteness. And the team changed the language to Black and non-Black, which was, in a project that was aiming at reducing disparities for African American women. Centering Blackness is very important. And then in their evaluation results, a big part of the report focuses on power and centering community voice now. So we've also provided resources and time for grantees to engage with and reflect on culturally responsive evaluation tools. So this is an example of Public Policy Associates work. They have a nice rubric which is on the resources sheet in your packet. But we asked our grantees to reflect on whether their work is conducted as a diverse part of the team, whether they had individuals with lived experience on the team. After taking this self-assessment, we asked them to reflect on what was their reaction, did they feel that it was relevant, and what were the pros and cons to conducting work with a diverse team. And then I heard later through the grapevine that people really have brought this assessment up in additional conversations and network phone calls. We've also been able to contribute to building a pipeline for evaluators of color. So research has been conducted showing that employers often seek candidates who are culturally similar to themselves. I want you all to stop and think about this if this statement were generalized. In what other circumstances do you seek out people who are culturally similar to yourself? And I've really taken this to heart, and even in my parenting, right? So my son, we grew up in a very white rural community, and I was thinking about, which parents do I even text for him to hang out with? And how is that then perpetuating his, who he hangs out with? And so really thinking about, when and what spaces are you picking people who look like yourself? And so when I was looking to hire a student to help with evaluation, I was down to 2 candidates, and one was very much a lot like me and was great. And another, Jasmine, had a couple of English errors on her application, because English is not her first language. And I ended up hiring her because I was like, yeah, let's build a pipeline for evaluators of color. And And she was absolutely fantastic. She taught me a lot. She was Latina and a second-generation immigrant, and this was her first experience with evaluation. But I learned a lot about her mom's experience, and that I never would have had the chance to know or understand if I would have chosen the other evaluator that my bias made me lean towards. And Jasmine is now finishing her master's in Chicago and looking to find positions in evaluation. So this is an ongoing process, right? We've held internal discussions about power dynamics and who benefits within the Wisconsin Partnership Program. We have talked about the power that's inherent in funding, and anytime we send out an evaluation or survey, people get worried and they think, how are they going to use this data? So we think about that. Even thinking about who the metrics and measurements serve and who benefits. Thinking about, so we're in an academic environment, and publications and leveraging funding are huge to us. And if we were to ask the community, do they care? Are they going to say that, if they're doing a community involved project, that they care about the outcomes of publication and leverage funding? Is probably not. And then we're talking about discussing valuing learning more than long-term outcomes and accountability. So if we're asking for large systems change and large policy change, people are making movement. That's a hard thing to do in a complex environment. And so valuing learning as along the way and rapid change is something that we're also talking about. So this work is for the long haul, and is a multi-generational commitment, really. We've had a little bit of challenge institutionalizing culturally responsive evaluation. Not everyone cares, and I'm not going to win every battle, and so we've been obviously trying to get others to think about power, who holds it, who doesn't, whose voice and perspective is privileged. That's very hard, and collaboration is important, and having a team and a support team to work and push towards this is important. And then to know that CRV takes longer and costs more money, but the payoff for sustainable change is really worth the investment. And to know the RFP, for example, was a 4-year-long change, and it usually starts with some individual journeys and work and people making the change that way. So as Nicole said, I'm on the Milwaukee Evaluation Board and started 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know. But they're a very values and intentional organization, and has really, been integrated in my practice, and worked on a survey of culturally responsive evaluation within evaluators in Wisconsin, and that data was quite eye-opening, and knowing that, of course, evaluators are not conducting evaluation in a culturally responsive manner primarily. And then I was just going to touch finally on why I care and why this work is important to me personally. So I didn't show this so you guys could see my nice bangs. I don't know why my mom did that. So this is me and my sister Lacey, and in a family of 7 kids, Lacey was the 4th. So she was right in the middle. She was a natural born mediator and someone with a huge heart. One of Lacey's closest friends when she was 18 was a girl named Kristen, who was funny and spunky and well-liked, but Kristen was struggling. She was gay in a small rural community where being gay was not okay. And she would take a lighter and she would burn designs in her arms, and she would cut her wrists, and she would talk about suicide often. And so 2 days before they went to college, my sister snuck out to help Kristen. And that night, Kristen intentionally drove herself and my sister into a tree that she'd specifically picked out. So we were told that they died on impact. And at the age of 18, 2 young lives were lost. And that was primarily because of intolerance and dominant heterosexual cultural norms. And so this is one of the reasons why I care. Culturally responsive approaches are about dignity and acceptance and support of those who have been historically marginalized. It questions traditional cultural norms that we exist in when they are oppressive and harmful to people. And at the age of 17, I obviously didn't know all this and what was, creating the conditions that killed my sister. But self-reflection is a tenet of CRE, And so learning and growing and doing better, it's been a journey for me. And it isn't a dichotomy in that you're either culturally responsive or you're not. It's really a journey. And so I've been intentional about my journey, reading books like Black Feminist Thought, taking Nehemiah's African American History course, challenging myself to identify and collaborate with people who don't have the same background as me. It hasn't been easy and requires humility and checking yourself and sometimes crying and sometimes being really angry and all that fun stuff. And I've been called out when I'm unintentionally not being culturally responsive. And that means sitting with that and taking in the feedback as well, even when you're saying, well, I didn't mean to. And I hope that your organization begins to take steps to operationalize CRV and starts to question in your own operations who benefits and who holds power in everyday situations, because lives are at risk. Thank you.